Now there are, according to what I learned, about 400 US troops in Taiwan already. But they help Taiwan to man their satellite station, ground stations. They keep doing electronic eavesdropping about vessels passing by the Taiwan island, etc. They check into Chinese mainland across the Taiwan Strait, etc. China officially opposes that, but from the Chinese perspective, given our huge confidence and very long continuity of historical perspective, we consider that to be nuisances, and it's not going beyond the point of declaring officially use of force to liberate Taiwan. So I think no one in the world will be in a position to rock the boat as far as the One China policy is concerned. No one can really help the Taiwan separatists to declare that Taiwan is an independent sovereign country.
Viewers, we are very honored to have Dr. Victor Gao with us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
it's
General.
a proud privilege to have you around, the foremost security, development, and geopolitical exponent on several issues. He's joined us on Magla Dialogue, and it's our privilege to take advantage of this opportunity and initiate a discussion. So, Dr. Gao, where is the world heading to? There was a unipolar moment, it gave way to bipolarity, and now it's a kind of a multipolarity. Various centers of powers are jockeying for position. And there's a one formulation by the likes of John Mearsheimer who say that the conflict is inevitable, that United States should take care of the Western Hemisphere by way of hegemony, and the China should dominate the Eastern. And there are those like Jeffrey Sachs who say that China's rise does not portend conflict or a threat to anyone. So, which school of thought you subscribe to?
Thank you very much, General. It's a great honor for me to be back in Islamabad and for this time mainly to attend the Magala conference. And I'm also very much privileged to join you in your studio to talk about all these things which are of great interest to mankind. First of all, what is the nature of the international order we are still living through for mankind as a whole? I believe the international order we are living through was founded back in 1945 after defeating Nazi Germany and the Japanese fascism. And that world order was meant to be multipolar to start with. Look at the United Nations and the Security Council and the 5 permanent member states, each with a veto power, meaning the world should be better if there is a checks and balances among the 5 permanent member states in the Security Council of the United Nations. And the world was meant to be multipolar to start with and should be multipolar throughout the subsequent decades till today. Something wrong happened in between, leading to one country in particular to believe it was the sole polarity in the world or unipolarity in the world, which I think has been an aberration or it's a mischaracterization of the international order. Therefore, multipolarity is not only the fact today, it also is a true reflection of the original intent of the international order founded in 1945 and should be preserved and protected by everyone involved in the world. Unipolarity is a false claim and should never be the case and can never be protected. And if anyone achieves unipolarity in the world of today, it will be a disaster for all the other countries in the world. So from the very beginning, allow me to say we are so happy to be in a world of multipolarity, and people and countries in the world should be treated as an equal. No one should be allowed to dominate above all the others or hold a gun at the head of all the other countries to demand their surrender or issuing ultimatum. And if anyone wants to destroy multipolarity to preserve their unipolarity, he probably will be the enemy of the world.
China is a developed country already, but it still has affiliation with the global south, and it in fact speaks very effectively for the global south. We see that the developed economies, they have a lot of love for democracy at home, but when it comes to global governance, the democracy is not followed. And what do you say about those global institutions like UN Security Council? Uh, how about a more democratic model of governance? Because this model apparently has failed to ensure global peace and security.
Well, first of all, China is both a developed country as well as equally, if not even more importantly, a developing country. Because in terms of the overall size of the Chinese economy, it is already 135% that of the United States if we use purchasing power parity as the benchmark. But using official exchange rate, China is still next to the United States as the second largest economy in the world. But looking at per capita income, for example, China's per capita GDP is only about 1/4 that of the United States, meaning there should be still much room for China to improve the size and the strength of its economy. China's official position is no matter how developed China will be, China will always be a member of a developing country because over the decades we have built up such a bond with all the developing countries. And by today, China is truly the real spokesperson for the global south. So in the coming years, coming decades, yes, China will be more developed and China will have much more impact in the world than it has today. But China will always call itself a developing country. That's number one. Number two is that ever since 1972, China realized that socialism should not mean poverty for the people. And Deng Xiaoping said socialism should bring about prosperity. But how to create prosperity? Deng Xiaoping emphasized development is the hard truth. And he called the methodology as socialism with Chinese characteristics. So ever since 1978, China has been following socialism with Chinese characteristics. More importantly, among the Chinese characteristics, socialism with Chinese characteristics are the Chinese characteristics, which can be all-inclusive, all-embracing. So wherever we go in the world, whichever country we encounter, we always want to see whether I can learn something from that country, big or small, poor or developed. And over the almost half a century, we learned a lot from all the countries, including from the great nation of Pakistan. China learned a lot about banking through our operations in Karachi, about civil aviation through our connections with Karachi at the time. And through Karachi, Pakistan actually brought us to other destinations. That's quite a few decades ago. So I think development is the hard truth. Always welcome chances to learn from others and be truly modest and treat everyone, every country as potentially your teacher. And then always focus on development. And we have several secrets we can share with the other developing countries. One is that if you want to become rich, build a road first. Without connectivity, you cannot command higher premium prices for your commodities or goods or agricultural produce, etc. The second one is in order to achieve real wealth, build things and engage in industrial output. China actually does not want to do things like what the United States and Great Britain did in the 1970s, deliberately hollowing out their manufacturing production in pursuit of what they believe to be financial profits, which they believe can be achieved quicker and on a more magnificent scale. China wants to engage in manufacturing capabilities, building things, and also achieve wealth through the sweat on our eyebrows, for example. And we never deign look down upon agricultural production, industrial production, etc. But we always believe that in order to really be a real builder, you need to use your brain. So we emphasize the modernization of science and technology from the very beginning. Now, you talked about democracy and the current paradigms. I believe without democracy, there will be no modernization. Modernization cannot be achieved if you are not democratic. But there is no set rule or set stereotype for democracy. For every country, your key challenge is to find a way of building up your democracy in light of your own national circumstances. Don't blindly copy democracy as a model from any other country because you are different from, let's say, the United States or Great Britain. Even the democratic system practiced in the United States is fundamentally different from that in Britain or in any other country. So democracy is a must, is a precondition to industrialization, to modernization, but democracy need to be adapted to your circumstances. It's the same thing for human rights. Without human rights, there will be no democracy. And without human rights, without democracy, there will be no modernization and no industrialization. But again, human rights need to be nation-specific. For example, in China, we never believe in the constitutional right of bear arms. It's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. But it's chosen by the American people. They have the right to follow their own constitutional right, but they end up with huge amount of killing by gun violence. But that's their choice.
President Xi Jinping has a vision. It was Global Security Initiative, then Global Development Initiative came, Global Civilization Initiative, now Global Governance Initiative. Can you briefly explain it all?
Well, from the Chinese perspective, when we look at the world of today, composed of 8 billion people scattered around in about 200 nations, for example, 193 of them are members of the United Nations. We look at the world and we see, wow, this international order was founded back in 1945, and 5 member states in particular made huge contribution in defeating Nazi Germany and Japanese fascism in 1945, including China, the United States, the former Soviet Union, and Russia today, and Great Britain, and to a smaller extent, France. And these 5 countries have become, from day one, the permanent member states of the Security Council of the United Nations. So we have tremendous amount of responsibilities on our shoulders to make sure that there will never be another world war, which will be a calamity for mankind. So that's number one. Number two is that when we look at this world of multipolarity, changed to, according to some, unipolarity, sometimes after the end of the Cold War, well, the world is wobbling. It involves a lot of uncertainty and chaos, partially because one particular country wants to dominate above the other countries in violation of the multipolarity principle, which was the true intent of the international order founded in 1945. So from the Chinese perspective, we do not want to have a breakup of the current international order. It's very contradictory to many other predictions. For example, China does not want to have a breakup of the current international order. China knows there are imperfections in the current international order, problems, weaknesses, sometimes distortions, for example, and we want to normalize the international order to such an extent that it will never be proclaimed to be unipolarity. It will never allow any country to dominate above mankind, and all countries, big or small, should be treated as an equal. That means we need to do some reform or improvement. That is the origin and the intent of the 4 global initiatives that President Xi Jinping very proudly, very boldly, and wisely proposed to mankind, including, as you mentioned, the global initiative of civilization, development, security, and the governance. Now, all these 4 initiatives are intertwined with each other. They become preconditions of the others and linchpins of each other. Now, when we look at the world, what is lacking is governance. huge amount of governance deficit. And again, in Western countries, they keep talking about conflicts or clashes of civilizations, as if, for example, there are civilizations which claim to be superior than the others. No, from the Chinese perspective, civilizations should all be equal. There may be strengths and weaknesses in each of these civilizations, but no civilization should be allowed to dominate above other civilizations. We have hundreds of nations, thousands of languages, different ways of culture and civilizations, for example. Each one should be fully respected, and no one should be marginalized, and no one should be allowed to proclaim that my culture, my civilization, my way of life, my faith, my God are superior than the others. Everyone should be equal. That's why this global civilization initiative is very important. Whereas others talk about conflict and confrontation or wars between and among civilizations, China believes that we need to have permanent peace and harmony between and among civilizations. And we believe this will make the whole world better and mankind happier, and civilization as a whole stronger for mankind as a whole. Now, when you talk about development, as I mentioned, we always believe development should be the hard truth. And by now, I even added something to it. I think development is the hard truth, the soft truth, and the smart truth. We need to achieve development in the hard way, that is through sweat on your brow, for example, but also very smartly and also very softly. We have the soft development right now. And when we face climate change, rising sea level, melting icebergs, for example, then we really need to think about development in a very philosophical way. We want to achieve accelerated development, but not at the expense of environmental protection. So we need to balance different goals together to make sure that as a whole, mankind and all the 200 nations and 80 billion people, 8 billion people should be better off as a whole, rather than we suffer the consequences of polarization and very huge advantage for a fraction of the population, but the overwhelming majority of the populations are destined to poverty.
The geopolitical analysts keep raising the specter of geopolitical tensions, South China Sea, East Asia, and Taiwan Straits. Seeing the present tumult in the world, Ukraine war, the recently concluded Gaza war, which in many ways still continues. What is your prognosis about the Taiwan Straits conflict?
Well, allow me to answer your questions together with the previous question. Yes, there are scholars in the United States who believe that there is destined for war scenario between China and the United States. They propose the Thucydides trap theory for China and the United States, as if China and the United States are bound to fight a bitter war to decide who is the winner and who is the loser. And then you also mentioned the distinguished professor who believes that the Western Hemisphere versus the Eastern Hemisphere need to be dominated by one country and the other country. This is completely against what China believes. First of all, I think between China and the United States, war is not an option and should not be an option. This is not only my view, it was the well-tested view of the former Secretary of State, Dr. Henry Kissinger, before he died. He kept saying war is not an option between China and the United States. If war breaks out, it will be mutual destruction. What's the fun of that? And I came up with my own theory. It's called the inevitability of peace between China and the United States. Part of the reason is that China has been developing so rapidly, and by now, in terms of armed forces, the ground force, the naval force, the air force, the submarines, for example, and the space force, and also the data information technology, as well as AI technologies, etc., China is on a par with the United States, not at a disadvantage with the United States. And if the United States wants to impose a war on China, being ground war, naval war, aerial war, space war, or conventional war, or nuclear war, or cold war, hot war, you name it, it will not win. It most likely will be mutually destructive. And it will be highly against the fundamental interests of the American people as well as of the Chinese people. That gives me enough confidence to say that between China and the United States, whatever problems we are, and indeed there are lots of problems which need to be solved, we need to use peaceful means, including, for example, negotiations, sometimes bluffing by the United States, etc., and diplomacy, mediations, whatever, to solve the problem, rather than threatening to use war, because war is not an option between China and the United States. And China keeps sending messages to the United States that if you want to impose war, you actually invite war to your homeland. And even though I do not want to make that point, but I truly believe in what President Putin and the Russian leaders say. If there is any third world war to be breaking out, it will be fought on American land rather than in Europe or in Asia alone. So the Americans really need to wake up to this harsh reality that if they provoke a war which lead to the third world war, they will not be bystanders. They will not be pure witnesses across the oceans, for example. America may be the real battleground. So let's all embrace peace. Let's all calm down. And let's really look at the rapid and significant increases in the Chinese military strength. And recently, China really officially launched the aircraft carrier Fujian, which uses the electromagnetic catapult. And it's proven to be 100% successful for the first try. That's amazing because President Trump just a few weeks ago claimed that the American electromagnetic catapult system was a failure. And he said he will issue a presidential order to abandon the electromagnetic catapult system to bring back the steam catapult system. But again, the company which built the steam catapult system in the United States went into bankruptcy quite a few years ago, and whatever that remains of that company was sold to a Beijing company. It is a Beijing state-owned company right now. So the Americans will be stuck with this dilemma. Either they have imperfect electromagnetics catapult system which they cannot use, which suffers breakdown and all kinds of problems, or they want to restore the steam catapult system, which they don't have the capabilities to do that because the company now is a Chinese state-owned company headquartered in Beijing. So I think this is only one example to show that between China and the United States, each has advantages and disadvantages in terms of their military power. And let's talk about peace. Now, with peace to be achieved between China and the United States, I think it will really increase the likelihood of more peace between and among many other countries or on regional levels. And China-US peace and stability will really contribute to the well-being of mankind. I agree with what President Trump said once earlier this year. He said, if China and the United States can see eye to eye on any major issue facing mankind, that issue will be solved. Nothing will be beyond solution if China and the United States agree to see eye to eye on many issues. President Trump even started to call China and the United States as G2, group of two. I don't think China will accept that description because I've said if the Americans want to build G2, I want to propose GW, group of the world, because from the Chinese perspective, no country is stronger or superior than the others. Everyone should be equal as a nation, as a sovereign power. So group of the world would be much better than G2. And China wants to cooperate with the United States completely. and we want to really truly abandon the US temptation to weaponize tariff or trade, for example. But eventually and philosophically speaking, I think GW, the group of the world, should be much better than any country or any two countries ganging up together to dominate above the rest of the world. On the other hand, General, allow me to make one point. The United States wants to build up their AI dominance. For example, they want to deny China's access to advanced semiconductor chips, to build up high walls and small gardens to prevent China's continued technological rise. That strategy is dead upon arrival because China used to spend more than $400 billion a year to import chips from everywhere, even though China itself was one of the largest producers of chips. But faced with the headwind created by the chips war launched by Washington, China is now fast becoming self-reliant in manufacturing of chips of all kinds, and also in very unique and proprietary ways of building chips, very different from the ASML methodology in the Netherlands, leading me to believe that in a matter of 3 to 5 years, China will not need to import any chips from anywhere in the world. United States, Japan, South Korea, or China's Taiwan province. China will be completely self-sufficient. Now that's only the first point. The second point, as happened to many other things, once China achieves complete self-reliance, China will become exporting chips like crazy, and it will drive down the overall cost of chips, minimum half. And most likely, the chips price will be a quarter of what is priced now.
Chips wars are unwinnable.
The chips war is unwinnable by the United States. It's dead upon arrival. And in order to build chips, you need to have a lot of well-refined rare earth finished products. And China has a chokehold on the rare earth finished products. So it's kind of philosophically, it's a self-defeating proposition to chokehold China for the semiconductor chips, whereas China has a chokehold on the rare earth finished refined products.
And same goes for the trade barriers and tariff wars.
The tariff war is the most stupid war I've ever come across. Why? Because the tariffs that the US government claims to be collecting is not paid by China or by Europe or by any country exporting goods to the United States. The tariffs, as a rule of the thumb, is paid by the American people. It's kind of a tax against the American people. But President Trump 1.0, President Biden, and now President Trump 2.0 never had the courage to tell the real hard truth to the American people. Yes, I'm charging tariffs on foreign exports to the United States, but you, the American people, need to pay the tariffs. They always tell lies to the American people. They say, well, China will pay the tariff, Japan will pay the tariff, and the Americans, you will become richer when the US government charges tariffs. The reality is just the opposite. The American people, for whom I have the highest admiration and respect, are being forced to pay the tariffs. And the poorer you are, the more as a percentage of your income you need to pay for the foods, for the clothes, etc. So proportionately, the lower your income is, the more prominently you need to pay for the tariffs the American government is charging the rest of the world. And I hope President Trump will really be honest with the American people and will tell the truth to the American people. And eventually, if the Supreme Court eventually, in a matter of months, makes a decision, if they uphold the decision of the Circuit Appeals Court, which already ruled that the tariff policies are mostly illegal and unconstitutional, then this whole tariff farce will need to implode and will lose a lot of steam. And I think the world will be happier because we all want to have free trade. And the United States was the champion of free trade for many, many decades. It is against the interest of the American people if the United States wants to abandon free trade. Let's all embrace free trade.
Dr. Gao, lastly, we zoom on to South Asia as a region. The relations have been fraught between India and Pakistan. So Pakistan has been a victim of proxy warfare. There are non-state actors being actively supported by regional powers. We have destabilized Afghanistan. So what role do you think China can play in reducing some of these tensions? And any ideas on a lasting peace and security, especially in Afghanistan, so that we reap the full benefits of trade, partnerships, and connectivity in South and Central Asia?
Well, first of all, South Asia is very important and is increasingly important in the world of today. Secondly, I think congratulations to Pakistan for defending our sovereignty and territorial integrity and winning the aerial battle against India on May the 7th. The world knows which country is the winner, which country is the loser. And now President Trump even publicly acknowledged the Pakistani win against huge Indian losses. I think it's truly a great victory for the Pakistani military as well as for the Pakistani people and the country and the government. That's number one. Number two is that there are problems on the Indian subcontinent, including territorial disputes, mostly left over by the colonial past, and then terrorism. And terrorism is an extremely challenge that we all need to collectively work together to wipe them out. China was on the receiving side of the spillover of extremism and terrorism, radicalization from the 20-old war in Afghanistan. And now the Americans are left, they are no longer involved in Afghanistan, but how to really deal with the residual amounts of radicalization, extremism, and terrorism, which sometimes can be weaponized by other countries, using terrorism as a breaking point to threaten other countries. So I think from the Chinese perspective, how to maintain peace, stability, how to promote development, how to promote cross-border harmony, how to make sure that different tribes, different people in different countries in the subcontinent will all embrace peace. And now you mentioned Afghanistan. I understand there are 6 neighboring countries of Afghanistan. How these 6 neighboring countries can really come up with a framework to make sure that they will deal with Afghanistan collectively for the betterment of the Afghan people, to promote peace and to prevent any spillover of terrorism out of Pakistan, out of Afghanistan into any of the 6 neighboring countries, including Pakistan, and also including China, because China's Xinjiang Autonomous Region borders with Afghanistan on the eastern side of the Wakhan corridor. And we all have a vested interest in making sure that South Asia will really be free from terrorism and radicalization and extremism, and we will all be peacefully committed to development. And we also use diplomacy as the best means to solve the residual territorial disputes. General, you also asked questions about China and its relations with Taiwan province, the South China issue. Let me be very brief. I think the whole world recognizes there is only one China, and Taiwan is part of China. Right now, there are 183 countries which acknowledge the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal representative of the totality of China. There are, interestingly, also a dozen countries, 12, I think, which recognize the Republic of China as the legitimate government of China as a whole. But there is no single country in the world which can ever recognize both China and Taiwan together as 2 sovereign, separate, independent countries. Why? Because it's against the reality on the ground. Secondly, China will never accept that. You either recognize PRC or you recognize ROC, but never you can recognize both as sovereign countries. And allow me to add, all the NATO member states, the United States in particular, have fully acknowledged the one China policy. But in recent years, the United States wants to turn the Taiwan separatists into their proxies, try to rock the boat as far as the cross-strait relations are concerned. I think China has all the sanity and maturity of the mind and the stability and the confidence, for example, to make sure, first of all, Taiwan will never officially declare independence, because if they declare independence, that's the moment of the ultimate truth, to prove beyond any doubt that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China. Secondly, China wants to prevent any foreign power, especially the United States, from deploying their troops in Taiwan. Remember, before China-US normalization of relations officially on January the 1st, 1979, the United States stationed huge amount of troops in Taiwan over the decades. And as part of the precondition, China forced the United States to pull out all the troops from Taiwan in order to achieve real normalization of relations between the People's Republic of China and the United States. So I think the US government will really need to think twice about whether they really want to push the edge of the envelope by deploying troops to Taiwan. Now there are, according to what I learned, about 400 US troops in Taiwan already. But they help Taiwan to man their satellite station, ground stations. They keep doing electronic eavesdropping about vessels passing by the Taiwan island, etc. They check into Chinese mainland across the Taiwan Strait, etc. China officially opposes that, but from the Chinese perspective, given our huge confidence and very long continuity of historical perspective, we consider that to be nuisances, and it's not going beyond the point of declaring officially use of force to liberate Taiwan. So I think no one in the world will be in a position to rock the boat as far as the One China policy is concerned. No one can really help the Taiwan separatists to declare that Taiwan is an independent sovereign country. You also mentioned South China Sea. I mentioned very clearly on September the 17th in Manila that the boundary of the Philippines is well defined by the 1898 Spanish-American Treaty. America defeated Spain, and Spain surrendered the Philippines to the United States. And as a result of the Spanish defeat, Spain was required to define clearly what's the boundary of the Philippines. And clearly, lo and behold, in the Spanish-American Treaty, it clearly defined in no ambiguous term that the western boundary of the Philippines is eastern longitude line 118, clearly defined. So whatever the Filipino territorial claims they've been raising since the 1970s was to the west of the longitude line 118 east, meaning they are moving across their national boundary to encroach on the Chinese waters. Now, I told the Filipino government in very explicit terms, whether you still acknowledge 118-degree line as your western boundary. If you acknowledge, then you need to abandon all your territorial claims to the west of this line. But if you do not want to acknowledge this line as your western boundary, then you want to cross the line to move west. Countries, including China, can also completely disregard your western boundary and cross the line to move east. One Filipino friend asked me, if you cross the line 118-degree east and move towards the east, where do you want to stop? I mean, first of all, it's a hypothetical question. Secondly, it will be very much interactive between China and the Philippines. Thirdly, purely theoretically, if you cross the eastern 118-degree line, longitude line, you can move all the way to the eastern boundary. Can you believe it? Meaning, if the Philippines wants to abandon what's being carved in stone in the 1898 American-Spanish Treaty, using eastern 118-degree line longitude as the western border of the Philippines, the Philippines may actually turn their table upon themselves about the integrity of the Philippines as a nation, because there will be no Philippines without the American-Spanish Treaty of 1898. And then before the Spanish colonization of the Philippines, several hundred years before then, the Philippines was never a unified country. And China had good relations with different parts of the Philippines at that time, and we do not need to go into details. So my warning to the Filipino president and the Filipino government is treat very carefully this eastern 118-degree line, because that's being carved by history as your western boundary. Don't venture beyond that line, move to the west for fear that other countries will disregard this line and move beyond this line and move to the east. Peace will be more precious for China as well as the Philippines in the South China Sea, if both China and the Philippines will recognize the historical conditions and promote peace between us and for everyone in the South China Sea region.
Dr. Gao, it's a privilege indeed to discuss with you all these important aspects. We stand educated, and I am really thankful on behalf of Islamabad Policy Research Institute that you spare time and shared your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much, General. It's a great honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Sir. Thanks.
大家好，本期视频分享的是高志凯近期在巴基斯坦接受采访的一段对话，从民主自由谈到福建舰航母、电磁弹射、AI、台湾问题、南海争端的信息量非常大。由于信息量确实很大，烽火呢挑几个点来谈一下我自己的个人看法。首先全球最火的议题，中美战争。中美到底会不会爆发战争？高志凯说不会。烽火的观点是美国想都不敢想。还有些台独分子、日本右翼分子竟然还天真的妄想着美国会为了台湾、日本的利益跟中国来开战，还是不死不休的那种。这些人怎么一点脑子都不长台湾是中国核心利益中的核心，是红线。如果中美开战，高志凯也说了，战场一定不会只是在亚洲，在中国，在台湾，美国本土也一定会变成战场。你们这些台独分子和日本右翼分子怎么敢想美国会为了你们把美国本土变为战场，还冒着巨大的牺牲风险，经济衰退和中国这样一个工业第一大国鱼死网破。我劝这些人别做梦了。如果收复台湾战争打响，这美国的400人撤退的比谁都快。不信你就等着看。高志凯说电磁弹射航母美国是全面落后，其实这只是一个微缩的点而已。它反映的是二战后美国逐渐的去工业化，追求巨大的金融利润的必然结果，代表着从福建舰开始，中美实力将逐渐此消彼长，再达到平衡，最后再实现反超。这就是一个国家去工业化的代价，这也是民主短视的一个结果，也是典型的代表。不用奇怪，不管是芯片、军事、科技，中国都将一一反超。这个过程不会太久。说到菲律宾那就更为可笑了。就这么一个小国家，无脑跟随美国，围堵遏制中国，自己几斤几两都摸不清楚了。你就庆幸中国是一个爱好和平的国家吧。关于与菲律宾的岛屿之争，国际海洋法之前的40年，国际海洋法之前，中国就已经画了11段线，早于 国际海洋法40多年实施，如果按照菲律宾的逻辑，美西条约都可以推翻，菲律宾的主权范围合法性都成了问题。烽火劝菲律宾好自为之，地缘政治竞争是非常残酷的。菲律宾这样的小国最聪明的做法就是不盲目的选边站。如果一旦站错了队，后果是菲律宾人民无法承受的。何况菲律宾离中国还这么的近，其中内涵自己去想去吧。好了，本期视频就分享到这里，大家有什么不同的观点可以打在评论区，我们评论区里见。